We welcome you to America's Roundtable, a weekly program from Washington, D.C., joined by co-host Natasha Srdoc from the Economist Intelligence Unit and the International Leaders Summit, Becky Norton Dunlop, and Joel Adensami. Today, we're delighted to have Daniel Schwammenthal, who is the director of the AJC Transatlantic Institute in Brussels. Before joining the Transatlantic Institute, Mr. Schwammenthal worked for 7 years as an editorial page writer and op-ed editor of the Wall Street Journal in Brussels and Amsterdam, writing about EU politics and economy, the Arab-Israeli conflict, Iran, radical Islam, and terrorism. Prior to that, Mr. Schwammenthal worked for 6 years as a reporter for Dow Jones Newswires in Bonn, Berlin, and Brussels, covering German and European politics, economy, and regulatory affairs. Daniel, it is great to have you join us this morning.
Pleasure to be on your show.
Economic sanctions worked in case of Serbia and the Balkans during the conflict, where they really were brought to the negotiating table and had to agree. And also to your point, mentioning one of the countries which is not the EU country, but Switzerland, that really does not uphold the sanctions. One of the EU countries, such as Austria, doesn't uphold the sanctions either. Is there a way to bring that unique voice from Western world? Because this is in all our interests. And many times we've seen in the past, United States many times in the end took the leadership to resolve very hot issues, like in the Balkans. When
Right.
U.S. got involved, things were moving much faster. So we also need to think about how to cut banking opportunities, because some of these regimes be not able to function unless they had Western banking practically helping them financially.
Right. Now, again, this is a crucial issue. I'm afraid there is, even though we have seen the European Union taking an unprecedented step of imposing these sanctions, they come very, very late. We are actually talking now more in terms of months rather than in years until Iran will presumably have a nuclear weapon. So I would have liked to see these sanctions imposed years ago when we had more time and could see how they impact on the regime. But I think even today, certainly not among the general public, there doesn't seem to be awareness of the dangers posed by a nuclear Iran. And as a result of this, there isn't the sort of urgency seen that the general public perhaps has in the United States. I think that the discussion in the U.S. is much more advanced than it is in Europe, and it is to a certain degree a failure of policymakers in Europe to really talk about this issue to the public in a way that they realize this is a real danger to our security, not just somewhere in the Middle East, perhaps just a threat to Israel, but no, this is a potential grave threat to our security. They have missiles that can already now reach Europe. There are Hezbollah agents throughout Europe. There is a large Iranian community in Europe, most of them, or many of them, certainly regime opponents, but among them there are certainly also many agents of the regime. And therefore, this is not something that won't affect Europe. But unfortunately, the public discussion, public awareness is not where it should be. And as a result of this, it makes it easier for certain companies, perhaps, to flout the rules.
Indeed, there is a lot of details to follow through in regard to Iran. The other issue that has been discussed very heavily is what's transpiring in Egypt today. And as we segue to concerns about the volatile situation in Egypt in regard to the recent elections, the fact that the Muslim Brotherhood has been able to make significant gain. And I was just noticing an interesting statement conveyed by one of the younger writers from that has covered the situation in Egypt as an expat. And he basically mentioned that Egypt today has a semi-emasculated Islamist president, a parliament in limbo, the strong presence of the Muslim Brotherhood, an overbearing military council, a restless public, all mixed up with an economic crisis. And this writer, by the name of Amro Ali, continues, questions are being asked. Is Egypt going to be like Iran in 1979, Algeria in 1991, old model Turkey, Pakistan in 1999, or even Egypt in 1954? And what do you see from your perspective, Daniel? Where will Egypt fit into?
Well, these are indeed grave questions. Egypt is the most populous Arab state. It's traditionally the leader of the Arab world. And of course, a key state because it is one of only two Arab states to have made peace and have signed a peace agreement with Israel. So the future of Egypt is extremely important for developments in the rest of the region. And as far as I can see, I think all these options are still open. It's very hard to say what will happen, whether these elections will lead to true democracy or whether the military, which now has dissolved, or that the court has dissolved the parliament again and diminished some of the powers that the new elected president would have. So it's clear that what we see right now is a sort of power struggle between the old forces and the military establishment and the Muslim Brotherhood, which have won the parliamentary elections, they won the presidential elections, and it is still unclear who will win and what a government dominated by Islamists would do. The most important issue for the West, for the United States and for Europe is, of course, we need to support the democratic process in Egypt and in the other countries. But we need to be careful not to confuse elections with democracy. It's good that we had more or less free and what seemed to have been more or less free and fair elections, but this is just the process. We need to ensure that whatever happens next, that this government, if it actually can wrest control from the military, will also uphold basic democratic values and principles, freedom of speech, equality for women, and minority rights and the rights for religious minorities and ethnic minorities, etc. And this is, I think, where we can play a role. We cannot really do much in terms of this power struggle, but we can definitely hold these people to account. One of the complaints that one hears a lot from the Arab world is that the U.S. and other Western powers have in the past ignored the human rights violations of Arab dictators in the pursuit of stability. And certainly, they were right to a certain degree, and so what we now need to do is not to repeat that mistake. So if we have an elected government in Egypt, then, we need to make sure that they too will now uphold basic, democratic freedoms and values, and also uphold international treaties, including the peace treaty with Israel.
Daniel, we talked about Iranian people that are suffering. What are the chances of Iranian revolution? Are there any chances, from your perspective, that Iranian people rebel successfully?
Well, that would, of course, be the most beautiful outcome if we had true regime change led from within. And I'm sure if we had that, we would see the emergence of a true democracy. Iranian people are extremely educated people. From all we know in terms of, there are of course no real opinion polls possible in a country like Iran, but sort of anecdotal evidence and from discussions journalists had, they seem to be very pro-Western and actually pro-American. So that would be the best solution for the Iranian people and for world security. I'm afraid it looks like that the regime has been able to successfully suppress the revolt, which started in summer of 2009, right? It actually preceded the Arab Spring, and perhaps, came a little bit too early, and the Iranians were very good the Iranian regime, I should say, was very good in controlling the situation, allowing some demonstration to go forward, but then really ranking up their suppression and incarcerating hundreds and killing so many people that I think it's going to be difficult to see a repetition. What we see is a very similar situation. Back 2009, the Iranians brought in Hezbollah fighters over to help them suppress their own people, and now the Iranians are returning the favor to the Syrians. There are Iran is not only delivering arms but also advisors and military personnel to help the Syrian dictator murder people. So it looks like the Green movement, the opposition movement in Iran, still somewhat exists, but it doesn't look like an uprising is imminent. But then again, nobody expected the Arab Spring before it really happened either. So hopefully we will be positively surprised.
Daniel, as you just talked very briefly about Syria, Fuad Ajami, senior fellow at the Hoover Institution, has traveled to the region recently and has actually just published a book in regard to what is transpiring there. And in relation to Syria, he basically states that Syria is in the middle of sectarian civil war and has appealed to Western leaders to intervene. On the other side, we've seen Senator John McCain, who has been very much engaged in various areas in engaging a response from the West, has conveyed concern that, for example, that the United States hasn't been very robust in its efforts to intervene in Syria. What is your read on what is transpiring in Syria? And also with Mr. Ajami mentioning that the sectarian civil war in Syria could spread to east and west, including Lebanon.
Mr. Ajami is, of course, a tremendous expert, and I'm afraid he's right. And we have already seen a few clashes in Lebanon that were basically spillovers from Syria. Syria considers Lebanon traditionally as part of its own, not simply sphere of influence, but part of its own country of Greater Syria, and has had occupied that country for 15 some years. What we see in Syria, it looks more and more like civil war, where we see, the Assad regime relies on the Alawites, a very small Shia sect that make up about 10% of the population. They are holding all the key positions in the country, and the predominantly Sunni majority people are making up most of the opposition. Then we have some other minorities, some Christian minorities and others, and Kurds, etc., that are somewhere in between. And thousands of people have already been killed. There was a story that a Syrian defector in Jordan told reporters that they had the orders to kill 5% of the people in every demonstration. So it shows the sort of, calculated effort by the government to clamp down and kill as many people in order to get the situation back under control. So I'm afraid that Annan plans that are out there are unlikely to pacify the region, the country. Assad has no intention of becoming a reformer or giving people democratic rights and I think too much blood has probably been spent for the opposition to simply give up now. There are a lot of arms flowing into the country. There are also reports about al-Qaeda elements operating there. And a very disturbing news item just this week is that Syria, which has one of the largest, if not the largest, arsenal of chemical weapons in the world, that the military has started moving parts of these chemical weapons. We don't know yet for what purpose, if they want to perhaps bring them into position to use them against opposition members or just to threaten them. It's definitely very disturbing.
Discouraging,
Yeah, it certainly is something that has been on the radar screen here in the United States. Our listeners are certainly closely following the developments in Syria. And I think, as you've mentioned very sincerely, Daniel, that the UN has really failed to provide some real results. We've seen these issues surface in Africa, for example, or even close to Brussels in the sense of what transpired in the Balkans, where you had a significant number of peacekeepers under the United Nations, and time and time the United Nations failed to deliver on resolving a crisis.
This is unfortunately a pattern, and with respect to Kofi Annan's involvement, it's very, very questionable that he said recently that Iran needs to be involved, that it has a role to play. This is, quite almost cynical to say that Iran has a role to play. Iran is playing a role, namely supplying the arms and technical know-how and expertise and support for Assad to butcher his own people. So how Iran could play here a positive role is hard to believe or understand what sort of policy he might be pursuing here.
Thank you very much, Daniel. We really appreciate you joining us from Brussels. This is Joel Sami, host of the America's Roundtable, and we're joined by Daniel Schwammenthal, who is a director of the AJC Transatlantic Institute in Brussels and formerly served with the Wall Street Journal. Thank you so much for joining us, Daniel, and we look forward to continuing this discussion in regard to what is transpiring in the Middle East, and our listeners are very much grateful for the insight that you provide.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be on your show.
While discussing sanctions against Iran, we mentioned countries in the West which have not implemented sanctions in the past, such as Switzerland and Austria. Despite UN sanctions, Austria's state-owned energy company OMV signed a memorandum of understanding to jointly develop the natural gas field with Iran's state-owned oil company. Austria's arms manufacturer Steyr-Mannlicher dealt with Iran as well. The bank industry of Western countries allow rogue countries such as Iran to operate, providing them with the banking support and infrastructure. Beginning in 2001, the bank Austria Kreditanstalt completed a dozen, mostly nuclear-related transactions in Iran. In Washington this week, Senator Carl Levin, chairman of the Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations, started holding hearings on HSBC, Europe's largest and one of the largest banks in the world, headquartered in London. The U.S. introduced a ban on bank transactions involving designated drug traffickers, terrorists, or rogue regimes such as Iran. The subcommittee found that for years, HSBC affiliates in Europe and the Middle East acted to circumvent the American ban.
From 2001 to 2007, HSBC affiliates sent nearly 25,000 transactions involving Iran, worth $19.4 billion through HSBC and other U.S. accounts. Its leading U.S. affiliate is HSBC Bank USA, known as HBUS, which has more than 470 branches across the U.S. and 4 million customers. In his statement, Senator Carl Levin emphasized, I quote, "The U.S. bank can end up aiding and abetting transactions that fund terrorists, drug cartels, corrupt dictators, and tax cheats. Wrongdoers can use U.S. dollars and U.S. wire transfers to commit crimes, arm terror groups, produce and transport illegal drugs, loot government coffers, even pursue weapons of mass destruction. That's why our country has made combating money laundering and terrorist financing a national security imperative." Unquote. America's leadership is vital in addressing these increasing challenges to liberty and security, and those in the West aiding rogue states such as what was found through HSBC and also Austria's dealings must be held to account. It is a moral imperative.